There has been a very, very concentrated effort here in the United States to ensure that this is a Democrat run country. And when I say very concentrated effort, I mean it. It's not just the conversations and the lies that's put out about Trump so that the public can hate him and he can't be in office. It goes a lot deeper than that. Let's get into it. Unless you've been under a rock, you know that the illegal migration here in the United States has been absolutely out of control. And a lot of people have asked why. And I just want to challenge you to be open to this theory that I have that I am going to present to you today. And I don't think it's necessarily a new theory for a lot of people, but I haven't heard it completely laid out the way I'm going to lay it out for you today. On January 20th, 2021, Biden signed an executive order that made it a requirement. This is very important that you hear this. A requirement that illegal immigrants complete the census. Now, this may seem like nothing to you, but most people don't know how important the census is. The census does not or isn't just a count of who lives in a state, a city, a county. The census ensures the correct amount of funding comes into your area for schools and roads and things of that nature. But what's more important than that, and this is where your antennas should start going up and red flags should start flagging. The census determines the amount of representatives for your state in the U.S. Congress. Again, you may say, that's not important. It is, but let's go further. The number of representatives in your state for Congress is also the number of electoral votes that your state has for the presidency. And this is where you start to notice that there is something really sinister happening. Now let's go back to January 20th. January 20th, 2021, Biden overturned over 78 of Trump's legislature, executive orders, etc. And he implemented and signed several executive orders himself with the requirement for illegals being counted in the census as being one. By March of that same year, 2021, it was counted that the number of illegal migrants crossing the border from Mexico from the south was higher than it had been since 2000. Within 2 months, that's less than 2 months actually, the number of illegals crossing into the United States through the Mexico border was higher than it had been since the year of 2000. By March of this year, 2024, over 3.8 million illegal immigrants had crossed the Mexican border into the United States. Those illegals were then dispersed to what we call sanctuary cities, like New York City, Brooklyn, like Chicago. And do you notice something common very common about those sanctuary cities? I'll help you out. They're Democratic cities, they're Democratic areas. Now, why is this important? Let's tie this back to the purpose of the US Census. And the ultimate purpose of the US Census is to determine the number of people in Congress for your state and the number of electoral voters in the Electoral College. Now, I want to go back and remind you that in the last 16 years, 12 of those years, the United States has been democratically run. And I don't know why we don't talk about it, but the 4 years that it was Republican, it was Trump, Hillary to this day says the election was stolen. Now, we don't talk about that. We only talk about Trump saying that. But to this day, Hillary is an election denier. To this day. Part of that is because the Republicans were not supposed to win. Things have been set up to ensure that the Democrats remain in power. And what I believe is that when Trump won the first time, they said, oh, this is not happening again. And we are going to ensure that we get back in power. And once we do, we will make sure that we put things in place to ensure that we remain in power. Think about the difference that 3.8 million illegals allowed in by the Biden-Harris administration and taken to sanctuary cities who are now being counted in the US Census. Think about what that is going to do for the balance of power in the Electoral College. Think about that for a moment. So when I say that the conversation of election integrity should not just happen the year of the election, this has to be something we are paying attention to every year. Because when you're not paying attention, executive orders are being signed, legislature is being passed. That ensures that people who are not legally able to vote, you cannot vote in the United States of America unless you are a US citizen, are being counted to determine the amount of electoral votes for the presidential election and the number of representatives in the House. I remember when I first started seeing the number of people sitting at the border, it was ridiculous. I just could not believe so many people were being allowed in easily. Allowed in. As we know, they've been given subsidies, food stamps, housing. In Chicago, kids had to get out of school earlier so that the migrants would have somewhere to sleep until housing was found for them. And initially, I questioned, is it because there was now this thing where if you fight in our military after X number of years, you can be a citizen. But the more I've started to dig into legislature and executive orders that have been signed, ultimately, I think this is all about keeping the Democrats in power. I think the entire move about illegals is simply about making sure there are millions more people who will vote for the Democrat. That's ultimately what all this is about. At least that's my theory. I would love to hear from you. What do you think about this, having this all laid out? What do you think? And do you think that means that, I hate saying democracy because we know this is a republic, but democracy is truly being threatened? And I said this in another video, that the Democratic Party loves to say that democracy is threatened by the Republicans and yet can't show how at all. Just theories. But we literally have proof, such as this executive order being signed, that will directly influence this presidential election 2024, as well as presidential elections moving forward, unless we get a Republican in the House that can reverse that order, a Republican in office, rather, that can reverse that order. Democracy truly is threatened. But I would love to hear from you. What do you think all this is about? Do you agree with my theory or not? And either way, why or why not? And if you love our country, if you're a patriot and you know other patriots, share this video out. Share this with other people who are concerned about us remaining a free country with the right to speak, the right to free speech, the right to bear arms, a person who believes in the Constitution. Share this out. We need to get this message out about what's really happening in the United States of America. If you want to go into more detail about this, I am continuing this conversation inside of our new private Patreon community. You not only can hear the rest of the commentary and ideas around this, but you also can see screenshots of the statistics and numbers, where I got it from. It's important to cite sources. And so you'll be able to see all that. And we really can have an in-depth conversation about what's happening here in America and how we can do something about it. Find the Patreon link in my description.